Niki Lauda began the defense of his 1975 World Driving Championship in a hurry. The Austrian and his crimson Ferrari simply won 5 of the first 6 races in 1976, finishing second in the other. Lauda appeared to be a dead certainty for back-to-back world titles, cruising serenely from triumph to triumph. Then, in one horrible, searing moment, the dead certainty appeared to be certain death. A crash in the German Grand Prix incinerated Lauda's season, his championship, and nearly his life. By the time fellow drivers were able to free him, he had been blasted by 800 degrees of flames for nearly a minute. He was given last rites, and doctors held out little hope after the massive damage to his lungs and face. That he lived is incredible. That he returned to motor racing defies belief. That he regained his World Driving Championship just 1 year later gives substance to its description as a miracle. Yet the miracle did occur because Niki Lauda is a man of extraordinary courage and tenacity, qualities needed to take him from deathbed to dominance.
I think everybody who has driven race cars or know what it's about having had an accident is that when you have an accident, physically you can be all right fairly quick if you have good doctors, but mentally is the problem. To force yourself to get back to the style of driving you did before, that means to reach all the limit or sometimes even be able to go over the limit.
The man who had carried the Ferrari team to the sun seemed to be in the chill winds of winter as the 1977 season opened in South America. The hallmark of Ferrari's success in recent years has been its reliability, and the driver who developed it after years of eclipse was Niki Lauda. But at Argentina, he appeared pariah to the team while attention was lavished on Carlos Reutemann, now receiving attention as the #1 driver at Ferrari. The servicing of a car and driver before the race spelled its outcome, and Lauda was receiving little reward for the tremendous investment he had made in the Ferrari success.
We had some problems in the management of the Ferrari team, which I sometimes disliked, and I just said it. Because I think I'm always honest, so if I don't like somebody and he really screws me around the whole day, I just tell him. And there we had the problem.
Yes, same problem. He's only quicker because he did 2 laps, more than you. Not perfect entering in the slow, that's normal here, because in high speed.
When I went to Argentina and Brazil, I was already driving really, as I'd done before, without any doubts and no problems, you know, thinking back to the accident. And then we just worked to try to improve the Ferrari and get as quick as possible back to being really competitive.
There is no room for politics in the tight cockpit of a Formula One racing machine. Lauda put aside any thoughts other than the task of regaining his winning record in South America. Britain's national idol, James Hunt, loomed as the most formidable rival in Lauda's path back to the championship. The McLaren driver had stormed to the title a year earlier with a string of victories matching Lauda's. He scored enough in the final race of the season to nip Lauda by the thin margin of 1 point. There was a Ferrari on the front row of the starting grid at the Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos, but the name on the side was Reutemann, not Lauda. The latter found himself in the wilderness of the 7th row, and after failing to finish at Argentina, Lauda's season was not opening auspiciously. Hunt and Reutemann shared the front of the grid and virtually all of the race. The Englishman led until just after the halfway point, when he had to pit for new tires. The Argentinian grabbed the lead from him and was never headed again. After his pit stop, Hunt raced through the field to second, but was never able to regain the lead he had enjoyed. Reutemann had won the Brazilian Grand Prix and the place at the head of the World Championship scoring table. Hunt was just behind and very much in the title stakes. The Grand Prix contest moved to South Africa with Niki Lauda a lowly 6th in the world title chase. No one who knew his single-minded dedication to excellence expected him to remain there very long. A perfectionist who describes himself as a better test driver than race driver, he arrived at the Kyalami track 2 weeks early to sort out the troubles of his car. The engineering and mechanical variables that can make a car go well or poorly are logarithmic. A steeper angle on the rear wing affords more traction but penalizes speed. A soft tire compound spells a surer grip on the track surface but threatens to wear out before the end of the race. Stiffer suspension offers better cornering but can punish its own components. To find the perfect balance of these variables is to win, and no one is better at this than Niki Lauda. The 2 grueling weeks at Kyalami began to pay off.
This was the first race where the Ferrari was really running quick again, and I could take the lead, and I remember when I took the lead I was very happy.
Lauda's efforts presented him with a 3rd position on the starting grid, next to the McLaren of James Hunt. Hunt seized the lead at the start, just ahead of the Austrian and the brilliant red car slipstreaming behind. After only 7 circuits, Lauda surged smoothly ahead of the man who usurped his crown. He was never to be headed again and sailed home the winner 70 laps later. His joy at again reaching the top was marred, however, by the death of Welshman Tom Price during the early stages of the race.
After the race I was sad because of this bad accident which killed Tom Price, so my feelings after the race haven't been good, they've been very sad.
Although he had beaten local hero Jody Scheckter by 5 seconds, the South African crowds made it emphatic they delighted in his win. To be crushed as heavily as Lauda and then to stand up and fight again draws admiration that knows no boundaries nor nationalities. It had been 8 months since Niki Lauda had mounted the highest step on the victory stand. His win expelled any doubts about his comeback and reminded the world that he could still be the class of Formula One racing. With the exception of Prince Rainier and Princess Grace, Monaco had been the personal fiefdom of Niki Lauda the previous 2 years. In both races, Lauda had started on the pole and led every inch of the way, never once running as low as second. Lauda's mastery of Monaco had been so complete the other drivers were seeking a change of anew. Except for Jody Scheckter, who learned Lauda's valuable lesson that once you were ahead on the narrow streets of Monte Carlo, you were all but impossible to pass. The South African had pounced on the lead at the starting flag with every intention of duplicating Lauda's start-to-finish successes. And the man who wrote the script found himself in an unaccustomed 6th place in the opening laps. World champion James Hunt's Monaco logbook is a series of disappointments, and 1977 was to be no exception. Hunt was well placed for a run at the leaders when a faulty valve in his McLaren cut short his afternoon. Those with valves still working perfectly were Scheckter and John Watson of Northern Ireland. The Ferraris of Reutemann and Niki Lauda flowed deftly up through the traffic and trailed closely. Lauda stormed past his teammate and mounted a charge at Scheckter that was to be the highlight of the race. With only 1 lap to go, Lauda had closed a huge deficit on Scheckter to less than a second. 20 laps earlier, it had seemed impossible for the Austrian to make up the 15 seconds behind the leader, but an inspired drive cut the margin with every circuit of the Riviera City. If Scheckter was going to end Lauda's success at Monaco, he was going to have to work very hard for it. The pair dueled as if there were no other cars on the road, and for the most part, there didn't seem to be. Scheckter drove superbly, but it was the thundering drive of Lauda that provided the drama. Scheckter flashed across the line a bare 20 meters ahead of Lauda, who had come from far off the pace to a stunning second. Scheckter's success kept him ahead in the race for the world driving crown, while Lauda's second gave him the same position in the title picture. The Belgian Grand Prix at Zolder afforded Lauda his second opportunity in as many weeks to pull off a hat trick. But, as at Monaco, he found himself far back in the pack on the opening lap. John Watson's drive ended abruptly when Mario Andretti collided with him and the pair spun out of the race. Everyone had suddenly advanced 2 places while the event was only seconds old. Anyone able to peer through the gloom would have seen a tight contest developing among, in order, Scheckter, Gunnar Nielsen, Jochen Mass, Reutemann, Jacques Lafitte, Patrick Depailler, and in 7th place, Lauda. Only one driver had gambled that the rain would stop and the track would dry. Hunt had spurned rain tires and fitted the faster slicks. He paid for his mistake by skating around at the rear of the field. When it did dry, there came the race within a race of pit crews changing all 4 adhesive rain tires to the quicker slicks. The inner race was snatched by the Ferrari crew, which had Lauda reshod and blasting away in 18 seconds. Hectic pit stops confused the entire field and made lap charts unrecorded. The pits became the whole race, and the mechanics almost more important than the drivers.
I think we haven't won the championship only because we've been so good. We won the championship this year because the other people made mistakes. So I think it is very difficult for a driver to hold himself back, to use the head and to drive quick in the right moment and to drive slow in the right moment. To take decisions even if they don't look too good for the moment, to keep cool, not to force yourself into stupid situations because everything looks bad. It's better to have 6 points sure than 9 points never.
Lauda's philosophy of 6 points sure paid hefty dividends with a 2nd place at Belgium, putting him within 1 point of Scheckter at the head of the championship table. Mounted police officers illustrated that not all the horsepower was harnessed to motor engines during the award ceremonies.
Nicky got into the 20s in the last run.
What?
Nicky got into 20s in his last run.
Late 20s?
Yeah, 8-7.
James Hunt and McLaren team manager Alistair Caldwell are confronted with a brace of compelling reasons for winning the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. An entire kingdom willed an English victory by their national hero in the Jubilee year. And at the halfway point in the season, Hunt would have to launch the defense of his title or see it fizzle on the launching pad. Hunt did his best for both causes by scorching to the pole on the starting grid with times no one could touch. Watson put his Brabham on the front row beside Hunt. The champion had only to look in his mirrors to see the red car with number 11. A year earlier, Hunt had worn number 11 and Lauda number 1, symbolic of the World Championship. Hunt fell as low as 4th at the start, but quickly addressed himself to matters of form and propriety and took command of the race. To the delight of a crowd of 85,000 and an entire nation, James Hunt motored home an easy winner, almost a full minute ahead of Niki Lauda, who had driven most of the race without brakes. The title holder was emphatically back in form with his home triumph. There had been a greater points chasm between he and Lauda the previous year, and he had still booted his McLaren to the championship. The euphoria of the moment made many overlook Lauda's 6 points for 2nd place in the same contest. The former champion was quietly stringing together a strand of 2nd place finishes that had moved him into 1st place for the title. Qualifying laps for the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim had placed world champion contenders and the drivers who had enlivened the season in the front rows. Scheckter took his first pole ever, with Watson, Lauda, and Hunt crowding behind. They sat stolidly through measuring processes ensuring conformity to the rigid strictures of Formula One. For many years, the German Grand Prix had been held at the awesome Nürburgring, an abusive mountain scar that many considered the most dangerous race circuit in the world. Many others lauded it as the ultimate test of driver and car. Years of protests by the drivers to boycott the track finally brought the race to Hockenheim, marginally safer in their estimate. Front runners on the grid got away smoothly, Scheckter taking the lead from Watson, Lauda, and Hunt. Behind them was pure chaos as cars wrestled to avoid each other and Clay Regazzoni limped nowhere with a destroyed vehicle. Hockenheim had hosted the German Grand Prix only once before, when Jochen Rindt had won it on his way to the 1970 World Driving laurels. It was more than fitting that Rindt was an inspiration for fellow Austrian Niki Lauda to enter motor racing. One of Germany's favorites, Jochen Mass, was a casualty when the gearbox of his McLaren packed up. It was a demanding day on machinery, with only 8 of the 24 starters still running at the finish. No one was running as well as Niki Lauda, who surged without effort past Scheckter on the 12th lap and was never pressed again. Scheckter soldiered along in his wake, but this was a day and event not to be denied Lauda. As he zipped by the flag, Lauda triggered an eruption of euphoria at the Hockenheim circuit. There was not one person unaware that the quest for the flag at the German Grand Prix a year earlier had nearly extracted the maximum penalty from the winner. To students of the classics, the Phoenix had risen.
Afterwards, I was quite happy because especially all these affairs with the Nürburgring, they all blamed me for that we don't go and race there, which I think is wrong because all drivers don't want to race there. So all in these political matters, I was pretty happy to win in front of the German their race in Hockenheim.
The Phoenix was a legendary bird that, destroyed by fire, rose from the ashes more powerful and youthful than before. Motor racing now had its own Phoenix. The Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort was a seminal race for James Hunt. Nothing but a win would keep him in the running to retain his title. Lauda was no less aware of the potential of reducing the field of aspirants for the crown and devoted days of testing and practice to tune the Ferrari to its highest pitch. The winning ways of Lauda had the effect of attracting the attention from a team that had largely ignored him at the beginning of the campaign. Lauda was again #1 driver at Ferrari, a fact he had known all along.
The rapport between the team and the mechanics and the driver is the most important thing, because if there's one little thing missing, you won't win. It has to be the total combination of team and driver.
And one of the great team and driver combinations of all time has been Scuderia Ferrari and Niki Lauda. Lauda is known with affection as the Rat. He made himself Super Rat. A super rat needs a super mechanic.
Hermano Kuogi, my chief mechanic, I think played as a big job as I did.
At Holland, Lauda and Hunt were paired on the second row of the grid. Andretti and Lafitte sat in the row in front of them, but the action promised to be between the two champions. A drag race developed at the start, everyone aiming for the advantage of being first through the narrow opening corner. Hunt got everything right, coming out of the second row and going by everyone in a red and white blur. There was confidence in the McLaren pits that their star runner was far from the end of his reign. Hunt's immediate control of the race left Andretti, Lafitte, and Lauda clawing at each other, and he was storming along in the style that had won him all the honors a year earlier. The end of the competitive championship season came precipitously for James Hunt and Mario Andretti at the Dutch contest. The pair collided while rounding a curve on the 5th lap, and all championship ambitions went swirling off the track with them.
First lap and then the 4th.
Couldn't you see right holding him up?
Listen, Colin, it's his job to get past. I'm entitled. If I'm leading a race, I don't have to give way, right? Colin, that is true. Would you ask your driver to give way? It's his job to find a way around. He's very quick. All he has to do is bide his pace.
All the steam was not exhausted in the pits, though, with Jacques Lafitte and Niki Lauda mounting a scorching duel for on-track honors. Lauda was clearly quicker and, after a dozen laps, simply drove by the Frenchman. Even the best designed cars function poorly without all their components. Carlos Reutemann has lost his rear wing. Reutemann's not the only one with troubles. Patrick Depailler has lost an entire engine. These are only some of the problems that make long nights for engineers such as Ferrari's Mauro Folgieri.
Because, you know, when I didn't like something on the car, I told Folgieri, and Folgieri, being a good designer, just changed the things in the right way so I could go quicker.
Folgieri and Lauda worked in tandem to develop one of the great cars in racing history. The Ferrari 312 was closing in on its third constructor's title in 3 years. Lauda's 15th Grand Prix success placed him ahead of any active driver and 5th in the history of the sport. All his successes had been gained in a Ferrari. But there were rumors that the Ferrari-Lauda relationship was coming to an end.
Everybody in the world knows Enzo Ferrari and his red cars. And I think he did a lot for all of us. So therefore I really admire him, even when he says sometimes some stupid things about me.
There was a bittersweet taste to the Italian Grand Prix at Monza as Niki Lauda rolled out to the starting grid. Every person in Italy wanted to see him boost the Ferrari home to victory, and every soul was deeply disturbed that he was officially leaving the team.
I told him this, that I want to race for Ferrari as long as he's alive, as long as all the things in the team stay so that I can win races and they do the best for me. And it seemed to me that there have been a lot of decisions taken against me or the way I thought the team should be run, and therefore I just asked him to release me of this word I gave him, because I went up to him and said, listen, please release me from that I told you that I want to race for you forever, because I don't want anymore. So he released me and therefore I left.
James Hunt might have been eliminated from the World Championship, but it did not bank his competitive fire. If there was a race to be won, he would try to win it. Jody Scheckter was the only man with a chance of catching Lauda for the title. Mario Andretti had to be rated as a great favorite, having been born and raised in Italy before emigrating to America. The starting flag is supposed to drop 10 seconds after the machines arrive on the starting grid, and a delay changes the grid to a griddle. In Italy, nothing happened for several times 10 seconds, and the volcanic engines began to boil as they awaited the flag. The fine-tuned engines are designed for everything but sitting still. When they were finally released, Scheckter bolted out of the second row and ran away from everyone else. Lafitte had nothing to do with the proceedings, his engine having been parboiled while awaiting the overdue flag. Hunt and Andretti were hounding Scheckter, with Lauda lying a cool fifth. Hunt made an unwanted pit stop to have his steering corrected, and it was the end of the race for him. Andretti had overtaken Scheckter and pulled easily away to win the one race he wanted more than any other. As a boy, he had come to Monza to see the great Alberto Ascari race. Now, like his hero, he had won it. To complete the Italian joy, Niki Lauda had claimed second, giving Ferrari an assured championship. Andretti had achieved a unique double, winning the Grand Prix of his native and adoptive countries in the same year. The Italian crowd was ecstatic over the double, an Italian-born driver winning the Grand Prix and Lauda taking the Italian car again to the World Championship for both driver and manufacturer. The history of Grand Prix racing is redolent with Italian names, reflecting the unbridled enthusiasm of its fans. It would be a much different sport without the litany of Nuvolari, Campari, Ascari, Bugatti, Lancia, Alfa Romeo, Bandini, and Ferrari. And there is an obvious Latin admiration for the man just across the Dolomites. The Italians know Lauda is far from the bloodless machine often depicted. Lauda expresses it himself.
I'm a human being like you are. There's no problem there. I don't think I'm a computer. The only difference is if I go to the race meeting, I'm there for racing. I'm not there for fun, for jokes, for enjoying myself, for traveling around the world. I go there to Argentina or Brazil or whatever, not to play tennis and to go swimming. I go there to race. That means from the first moment I arrive there, I think about my race car, I think about the race. And when I go away, I think about the next race.
The next race was the American Grand Prix in its eastern form at Watkins Glen. Lauda needed but 1 point to put himself out of reach of any other driver, which meant at least a 6th-place finish. James Hunt put himself on the pole, with Lauda 3 rows back. Lauda was content to lie off the pace in the rain, gathering the 1 point necessary to clinch the title. Pit crews warned the drivers to cool their tires by driving on the wetter part of the track to avoid excessive wear. Although as low as 8th at the start, Lauda worked his way to 4th and 3 championship points beyond the reach of other drivers. The positions held until the end, Lauda running his championship total to 72, the highest ever scored in a season. James Hunt charged into the pits with a well-earned victory. Niki Lauda came in with the World Championship.
And when I made these 3 points in Watkins Glen, I felt how hard the pressure is even being short of 1 point only, because psychologically it was no chance for Jody at all. But even when you take the point, you know, you feel how much pressure comes off you, and I was really happy there.
Niki Lauda had done the unbelievable. To come back to racing at all was amazing. To come back and win it with a record-breaking performance was a feat that must be savored over the years to be fully appreciated.
You know, the first championship for me, it was easy, it was difficult in '75. But now thinking back, through all the things I went through, and the year I had this year, this was 100 times more difficult, and therefore I'm more happy about this one.
If it were 100 times more difficult, you had to be 100 times as good to win it. The Phoenix is a living legend.